Exomologiste to Kyrio te agathos alleluia.
Otis ton neona to eleos aftu alleluia.
That's not a good example on my part.
Fair enough. Oh, hello,
Maybe
folks.
maybe like churches, like you see they have got gargoyles.
What's that?
They have got
Oh,
gargoyles.
gargoyle. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know that a good example actually is in Rome.
Yeah.
There's a pillar, and it's a Christian. We consider it a Christian symbol. It's a Christian pillar. It has a cross on the top of it, but it's actually originally it was a pagan symbol, but Christians came and basically Christianized it,
Exactly.
and now it's a Christian
Yeah.
thing.
I feel
yeah.
Muslims may have done something similar with the Bible. Islam applies
Yeah.
through the Quranic lens.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think what also happened is, I think whenever they encountered Christians who would maybe they'd have a copy or some way of showing a written account of the Gospel, the Injil, or the Torah, what Muslims would do is they would basically say, first of all, you're misinterpreting it, and try that way.
Yeah.
Talif al-mana as opposed to
Meaning.
laufs.
Yeah.
But then, if that doesn't work, then they go to the next step, which would be, well, the copy that you have with you is just not a reliable, preserved copy. So in other words, however you've done it, this Christian has just come across a corrupted copy of this. But they wouldn't deny the existence of preserved copies. They would simply say that the one they've engaged is
a matter narrative or something.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
accept it in its general narration.
Yeah.
But not necessarily like word for word or every I or every T.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some doctrines that I don't think can be reconciled. So ultimately, they would just have to say, look, I think this is Talif al-Laufs, this is an actual change in your copy. And they would just say, but there is other copies that actually are correct. And the reason why they would say that is because the Quran gives pretty strong support that there are believing Christians and Jews in Muhammad's time in the Hijaz somewhere that did actually have access to the revelation. So, and then of course by the time we get to the 11th century, we have Ibn Hazm, writing from Al-Andalus.
Negative.
And he embarks on, and he does it primarily by looking at the Torah, and he says, look, the Torah says, Noah was naked, and his son saw him, and Noah was drunk, and Lot slept with his daughters, and these sort of things. Judah slept with his daughter-in-law. That cannot be reconciled with how we understand prophets today in the religion of Islam. Because by then you see the doctrine of Isma, and they Muslims are saying that prophets cannot intentionally sin, and yet here in the Torah we see quite clear things where, well, Noah chose to drink, and he drank to excess, so that was intentional. So he actually argues from that perspective to come to the conclusion that the Torah in the 11th century is not the Torah that was given to Moses. And then he advocates for complete loss. The Torah is lost, and by extension he also does it to the Gospel, completely gone. And that's why the contemporary Islamic position today, among both scholars and laymen, is generally that the Torah and Gospel have been lost. Yeah, so, I was talking about my book, I love this stuff.
I think it's ambivalent. I think there's both positive and negative statements, but there was a recent book done by a Christian guy. It's a history of the Muslim view of the Bible. I forgot the name of the author, Martin.
Oh yeah, Martin Whittingham. That's it's by De Grue. I can't pronounce. It's a big publisher in German, I think. But yeah, I have the book. It's one of my favorite books.
At the back, he's got an appendix.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And it shows that the majority of the verses of the Quran are actually positive.
Yep.
So and the ones that are negative, they're mostly to do with meaning.
Yeah.
Rather than textual.
Yeah, it's like so the Quran does, for example, talk about prior prophets in a correcting way. It says, hey, you guys have the wrong understanding of Abraham. You say he's a Jew, you say he's a Christian. No, he was a Hafiz. I'm forgetting the term. What's the term again? Hafiz or Hani? I'm trying to remember the verse. It might be 365. But that's it, yeah. It's saying that Abraham is neither a Christian nor a Jew. And that the Christians and Jews are in error when they say this. So the Quran does correct belief of the Christians and Jews. But as far as the Quran is concerned, when it talks about...
It has to do with meaning rather than...
interpretation. When it comes to the actual written text, it thinks it's from God. It thinks it's And the thing is that it thinks that Christians and Jews are accountable to follow that, to lead them to Islam. So, for example, you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 146, and Surah 6, ayah 20, and there's other verses as well, but it makes it very clear that Christians and Jews recognize Muhammad as being the prophet that was mentioned in their scriptures. It says that they know him more than they know their own sons. There's even a verse in the Quran.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember the verse.
That's fine. There's even a verse in the Quran that the Christians and Jews, or people in the book, when they hear the Quran recited, they say, basically,
recognize this to be the truth.
Yeah, we were even before this Semites. Even before this, we were Muslim in a way, and that's interesting, right? So the Quran is very clear. Look, you can derive the truth from these things, at least for prophet.
The Quran also says amongst them are believers as well.
Yeah, Surah 2, 121 says that there's a true recital that they're reading. Surah 244 says you recite you teach the scriptures to people, and yet you don't follow it. You're hypocrites. Which of course implies that they ought to be following it correctly rather than just teaching it. Surah 399 says again there are Christians that are following this correctly. Oh, people of the book following this correctly. There's a lot all over the place, really. That's a very positive view. In Martin Winningham's book, the one that you mentioned, in the appendix, it's 119 verses. I know because I counted them. And the negative one, it's 27 or 24, about thereabouts. It's nowhere near the same.
And even the negative ones are mostly to do with meaning.
Yeah, mostly to do with meaning. And there's
there's like maybe 5.
Yes.
That are
So
like,
Yuharifuna.
he understands that to be.
Yes, based on a particular verb, Yuharifuna, if I'm saying it right.
Tahrif, basically.
Yeah, so it means it often gets translated as distort.
Yeah.
So there are verses, for example, 541, 514, I think, 275, and there's one more, 446, I think. But Abdullah Galadari does a great response to this. There's a scholar called Abdullah Galadari. I don't. If you watch Exploring the Quran and the Bible, Dr. Reynolds' channel, he's on there. So he actually.
What's the title of the video?
I don't know, but you should be able to find it. He's not done too many videos with him. But maybe look at the transcripts. Actually,
what was the topic of discussion?
It might have been his book, Quranic Hermeneutics, which is a good book, by the way. It's probably not in line with Sunni. I get the impression it's not in line with Sunni tradition. But I don't know where he's coming from exactly. It just the way he speaks sounds. I don't know. I don't have a better word, but liberal, but like more out of the Sunni tradition. But I apologise if he's not. He actually is. I apologise if I got that wrong.
No, it's fine.
Anyway,
I mean, I consider myself a bit liberal as well. So,
but would you say you're Sunni though?
I'm Sunni.
Right.
But even sometimes with these left and right terms, they're not helpful.
Sure. Yeah, I don't find them sufficient.
I would regard it as being the traditional view. Others would see it as liberal.
Right.
But for me, it's not about whether you're left or right. It's about right or wrong or truth.
Yeah, sure. I just want to. I understand that within the Sunni paradigm there is certain limitations, right? I think that's fair. Like, for example, in Christianity, you can't say you embrace Orthodox Christianity and then deny the incarnation or something.
Sure,
no Christian will accept that.
The prophethood of Muhammad.
Right, exactly. Right. There are some things that you have to say. But yeah, so these verses that we mentioned with the verb yuharifuna, Abdullah Galadari says, well, actually, in most of the instances here, if you read literally the next verse or the next 2 verses, there's a verse that is one of the Masadic verses where it says to confirm what you have. So if you think of it as being distorted and corrupted, then you then have to reconcile that with the very next verse. For example, Surah An-Nisa, ayah 46, that's Surah 4, ayah 46, says just distortion. It talks about how there are people in the book distorting and concealing. And the very next verse says, basically, this is a Quran that has been given to you confirming what you have with you. So it's like, well, it doesn't seem like it can mean corruption in some kind of ultimate sense, because how could you confirm anything then? So clearly it's just...
I think it's ambivalent. Like, I think the Quran is ambivalent on the subject. So there's both positive and negative verses. And
I would disagree with that.
Okay. Well, I would
Because-
say
so-
also the Quran also gives a concession to Jews and Christians to follow their own particular laws for like civil,
So-
legal.
Yeah, it does. So you're going to say like Surah 547, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Surah 543 for the Jews?
Judge or govern by what?
Yeah, by what it's
you're
going to
doing, yeah.
Here's the thing. So would you accept that that means that the legal aspect of the Torah and the Injil is valid in the 7th century? Okay.
Well, it's a concession that they can like, if they don't want to accept.
Oh yeah, I agree that he is calling them to Islam. I think he is,
Even
yeah.
The Quran says that God has revealed different laws,
Right.
paths, so that
Yes,
He may test
so
by
548.
what He
Raised to
has
do all that
given
is
to
good.
you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you will return back to God. And He will
Yeah, you'll be
inform
judged according to what you followed and
you. Yeah, and He will inform you about what you
differed about. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. But you see, I take that and I apply it to other parts of the Quran. So for example, in the same chapter, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah 5, when you get to 66, and then of course you get to 68 where it says, I think it's like, oh people of the book, you stand on nothing unless you stand on the Torah, the Gospel, and all that has been revealed to you by your Lord, which is the Quran. So he's equating these here. At the very next verse, 69, goes on to talk about how the people of the book can be saved. And it says that those who believe in Allah and the last day, and it gives
and do good work.
yes,
good deeds.
then they will not grieve, they will
Yeah.
have. But you see, if you understand that in connection with the previous verse, it seems to imply that the Torah and the Injil, which it just affirmed, it says you've got to stand on it, are actually valid not just for legal readings, but for theological readings such as the nature of God and soteriology, like what it means to be saved. Because this is, of course, in the context of, well, are they going to go to Jannah potentially? At least, and of course, I agree that this is not after Islam. I think you can read the Quran in the way that it basically says, and now Islam is only
I
for you.
don't believe
But-
those verses have been abrogated anyway.
Oh, really?
I think
Okay.
they're still even valid today.
Oh, interesting. So do you say that Christians and Jews who follow the Torah and the Gospel in some kind of way can get to Jannah?
I believe God's just, and just because you're not a Muslim doesn't mean that you're automatically going to go to hell.
Right, so I obviously agree with that. I think God is
believe
just.
God is basically judging people according to their ability, what
capabilities,
they know.
their
Because even
limitations.
in the Quran it says
Yeah.
God doesn't impose upon a soul any more than what it can bear.
Fair play?
And that God desires ease on you and not hardship.
Yeah.
So for some people, due to their circumstances, it may not be possible for them to become
Yeah.
Muslim or embrace Islam. So I believe God's merciful and just to them.
I think that's a good perspective to take. The issue I have with it, though, is that, for example, give me a second. Got a bad cough. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, I know, I'm taking antibiotics now. Anyway, in Surah 5, Ayah 47, it says, oh, people of the Injil, judged by the Gospel, and if you don't do this, basically bad things are going to come to you.
I think
that-
something like you are the wrongdoers. Or
Yeah.
you're sinful.
Yeah. So what I understand by this is that there is now a command to follow it. And again, I would tie that with other parts of the Quran that also justify other categories, like theology and soteriology. I can go further than that, actually. I think the Quran says prophecy is valid as well. So it's prophecy, the Mosaic law, the law of the gospel, and theology, so the nature of God, the nature of the last day, and soteriology, because they're talking about what it means to be saved. All that, and parables, because the Quran quotes Jesus' parables, so they're authoritative.
Okay.
So if you want to categorize this, and this is part of what I've done in my book, we have to say that actually a broad stroke of categories are affirmed as not only being true, but also being authoritative to those groups, either as something that Allah wants them to do and to follow out and to believe, but also to actually lead you to Islam in some instances. Like, for example, the prophecies of Muhammad, right? So the issue I have then is Allah is telling Christians and Jews in the 7th century that what they have in these categories is something they should actually believe and follow. But if you say, and I don't know if you do, but if you say that these things have been corrupted or altered or lost in any form, then that seems to be a direct contradiction with the assumption the Quran is making, which is that the Christians and Jews actually ought to follow this. In other words, if I told you, I've left you a list of instructions at your home to follow, and you go home and there's none there, and I say to you, if you don't follow them, you're going to be in trouble, and I'm going to impose some punishment on you, then that only makes sense if you really could have actually gone home and read the instructions. If there was no way you could have done that, then I think the Quran is it's in contradiction, it's incoherent. In that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's ambivalent when it comes to the subject of the previous scriptures. So when it says it confirms, it uses the preposition min.
Right.
So min means of or among. So again, it's something specific and not like...
I don't think the preposition min is in every place where Mosadiq is used.
It's used in 558.
Okay.
And
Careful.
Oh, I nearly
It's
went
all right.
there.
It's all right.
That was a flipping ugly. It was ugly. I tell you what, once you press the button, things go quick, don't they?
Yeah,
They
do
really
it,
do.
do
God bless you, my friend. He's a kind, humble
I know he is,
man.
yeah. He's a good amateur child.
You are
Yeah.
a great exemplar for your religion.
Yes,
man.
yes, you are.
Thank you.
Yes, you are.
Chris, God bless
Yeah, what about you, Colin?
if you know of an example, because I can't think of an example
Well-
where preposition min isn't used, but just to give an example of this word min, you know the last chapter of the Quran, Surah 114.
Yep,
You
Surah
have the
Nas.
word min, which says from amongst mankind and jinn kind. So from amongst jinn kind and mankind.
Yeah. So I'm just going to try go through some.
Again, it doesn't mean all jinns or all of mankind, but some of mankind or some of jinn kind.
The issue,
There are
well, first of all,
they are devils.
let's actually grant this just to see if this works, because the first issue I would have is the way that we communicate in language. If I were to say to you, Naz, could you please buy me a bottle of water? And I never elaborate. I don't go, but it has to be like this, it's only this, or it's
Or
this,
this brand.
and this brand, you know. And I just say, can you get me a bottle of water, please? And then you do, but what you actually do is you give me an empty bottle of water. Or maybe there's like traces of water in it, but basically it's all gone.
Okay, yeah. I see.
Now, I would immediately turn around and say, well, hang on a minute. That's not what I meant when I said that, because it should be understood, the plain meaning that we should have colloquially understood, both since we know what a bottle of water is that it would be a full bottle of water. Because I never elaborated. And likewise with the Quran, the same principle would apply. If the Quran author says in 6 verses, the term Mosadiq, in conjunction with what is with you or what is with them. So this isn't Mabayna Yadehi, this isn't what is between their hands. Which some Muslims would say, oh, that's only talking about the original revelation. But there are 6 verses that talk about what is with them in particular. And this is Muhammad or Jesus or the jinn or Allah giving these commands. It actually comes from multiple people in regards to the Quranic context. Even the jinn, the good jinn, they hear the Quran and they actually say, we hear something like what came before it, confirming it. Which is really interesting. There's a verse that, the good jinn do that.
I mean, if you can find a verse without that preposition min, that'd be interesting to look at. But like you do with the Bible, you take the Bible as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely,
and
holistically.
interpret in the light of other verses.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And likewise with any book or any scripture, you interpret within the light of its own context as well as its subtext. The other thing is you can't deny key doctrines of Christians, like the crucifixion.
Yeah. Well, from the Sunni
Okay.
tradition. Yeah.
Well, let's just take it for granted, and just for argument's sake.
Hang on,
Quran
bud. Go on.
denies
Sorry.
the crucifixion of Jesus, for example.
Sure.
So would there not have been any Christian that would have said that, look, your book denies the crucifixion? But yet the Prophet
Well, you see,
Muhammad
okay,
said-
so I'm going to go critical here. So, first of all, it's so interesting. Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4157, if you read the verses preceding it, the context is not Christians. The context is Jews, which, who talks about the crucifixion? Like, who's going to talk? If you
I would
expect
say Jews
people to
as
talk.
well, if you present Jesus to Jews.
Well, okay, yeah, but they don't go around saying, hey, Christians, Muslims, I want to talk about the crucifixion. Like, it's not of interest to them, really.
The Quran's been revealed in a polemical religious environment.
Yes.
Where the Jews and Christians and Muslims debating one
Yes,
another.
yes.
So within that environment, you would have Jews having a particular
Right, so
position.
the Jews are obviously having a response to the crucifixion, and I think the Quran is addressing that response. But how interesting it does that, and it doesn't address the Christian claim. Because the Christian claim would be that's the assertive, positive case for the crucifixion. So surely the Quran author, if he wants to convey the crucifixion and is an error, he would address the Christians. He would say, hey Christians, you say Christ was crucified. That's an error. But he doesn't. He says, the Jews say that they killed the Messiah. which is an interesting. I think that's quite polemical,
I
right?
mean, even the New Testament says, like Peter in the book of Acts, accuses them of like you crucifying, Christ,
Right.
Messiah, and so on.
Yeah,
and
polemical
even Paul
language.
in 1 Thessalonians as well.
Yeah.
Says the Jews killed
Yes.
the Messiah.
I think Nazir Ahmed, I had a chat with him and I think he brought that up. I agree that that's there, it's kind of language. But I think
If the Quran is confirming what is wisdom,
Yeah.
then there would have been people that would have said that your book contradicts our
no,
book.
I think more realistic is that the Christians probably understood what was meant by that. They probably were like, well, this is to the Jews. This is denying the Jews their supposed claim of being like, ha ha ha, the Messiah died, we were victorious, because in their view it's a false Messiah. So I think that's basically what the Quran's doing. And I think the Quran, there's evidence for this in other verses. There's
I
1933.
have a problem if someone chooses to take that particular interpretation.
Right.
For example, there's Dr. Khalil Adnan, he takes
Oh, yeah.
that
Yes.
particular interpretation.
Yeah. So well, for me, I think that makes more sense of what I'm reading and the context around it.
Also, I wouldn't want the crucifixion to be a reason, like a stumbling block for someone from embracing Islam.
Right.
And like you said, there's certain things that we would consider to be essential that would define a person as a Muslim. And for me, the crucifixion is not necessary. It's like how you would interpret that verse. It's not like,
It's not a primary doctrine for you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
even though I have a different faith, which is that he wasn't crucified, but if someone took a different understanding, then I'll be fine with that. But the main thing is, I'm just saying, for argument's sake, the Quran denies particular Christian doctrine or beliefs.
Yeah.
Then other Christians would have noticed that and they would have pointed that this contradiction between the Quran on the one hand affirming what Christians have, but at the same time denying key doctrines that Christians believe in. And yet, despite that, the Prophet still continued to deny these doctrines, despite him being informed or would have known that his book contradicts certain particular beliefs.
Yeah, I think
Jews and Christians.
the issue I have with that is I think that realistically you can preach messages in which certain groups of people are hearing certain things that other groups aren't. For example, I think Muhammad, when he was reciting the Quran, probably did so to his own audience in a different way than he would have the Christians and Jews. Well, for example, if he's going to engage them, I think he would have brought up things that they were probably very familiar with. So Miriam, for example, and that's actually part of your tradition, right? When they went on
It doesn't go into details, like the Quran takes particular stories
Yeah.
that were known and
Yeah.
then gives its own polemical or teaching or lesson.
Yes, I think the author of the Quran changes his stories for their own practical purpose. Well, yeah, I think.
Practical, polemical.
Yeah, I think so. And this is the issue I have with the idea that some Muslims would say the Quran is a re-revealing of the Torah and Injil in the sense of whatever the Quran contradicts of the prior scriptures, the Quran is just the original. So, for example, the story of Moses doesn't line up with the story of Moses in the Genesis account, right? It's not one-to-one. It's not the same account. There are differences.
Do you have anything in example?
Well, I'll give you an immediate one from the account of Joseph, because it's that one that I go to in depth in my book to refute this particular argument, because the Quran actually, its longest narration of a prophet is in Surah 12, where it talks about Joseph very in detail, it goes through multiple aspects of his life. What's interesting is we know from scholarship that Syriac Christians had taken homilies and commentaries and had reframed the story mainly for laymen and mainly to emphasize typological arguments for Jesus. So they compare, for example, Jacob of Saru, who was a Syriac bishop in the Church of the East, like a century or two prior, he was taking the story of Joseph and he was very much into typology, as were others like Afrahat and others. And they were saying, yeah, Joseph is like a type of Christ. Because this is something Christians like to do in our history.
We also did that with the Prophet Muhammad in the
Yes, they did as well. With prior.
reported that the Prophet said, I would say what Joseph also said at the time.
Yeah, and even apocryphal works. They take the Torah or the Old Testament, and they understand potential apocryphal end time views, and they apply that to not just Muhammad, but also the caliphs as well, which is really interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the earliest account we have of recorded Sunni narrations that go back to actually the Israeliyat. So Abdullah, bin Salam and Salman Al-Farsi and
A lot of them come from.
Kab Ahmed, I think his name is. I'm trying to remember his name. Yeah, they have recorded narrations where they talk about the end times. That's right, man. And they relate it to the caliphs, which is really kind of interesting. But anyway, yeah. So ultimately, for me, I don't think it's enough to say, well, Christians and Jews would have seen this and they would have opposed it. I think that depends very much on what was being presented to the Christians and Jews at the time. I don't necessarily. Well, I don't think the crucifixion is. I don't agree with your way of looking at that. I think the crucifixion is actually probably being affirmed in the Quran. It's just denying the Jews the power of it. In combination with that verse in the Quran, I think it's Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah says, "You did not kill them. It only appeared to you as if you did. It was Allah that killed them." And although,
I think.
oh, okay, my bad. Maybe it is. Okay.
About the Battle of Badr. When you slew them. It
Oh,
wasn't
of course,
you who
yeah,
slew,
yeah.
It was God. I
Nice.
see that as divine agency.
Yeah. So well, I see it also as Allah is telling them, stop taking glory for yourself in this action, because it was only through me that this occurred. And likewise, I would apply that to the crucifixion. I'd also apply this with Surah Miriam 33. Blessed is the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I resurrect. Yeah. So anyway, but that's just my view.
I'm taking
But,
up
yeah.
time to connect to something, you know?
That's right. No, it's right.
I'm happy to stay. So.
Yeah. Well, same here.
Just let me know when you need to finish.
Sure. But what I will say is, I don't think there's a single verse in the Quran that says that either the Torah or the Gospel are in some way wrong or corrupted. Can you think of one? I would like to see.
So the obvious one that most people bring up is Surah Baqarah's ayah 79.
Yep.
Woe to those that have written the book with their hands.
Have you heard my view on this? So if you read the very next verse, it starts off with what, and it basically says, and they say, never will the fire touch us except for a limited number of days.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is that quote, again, this is a continuation of the prior verse, it says, and they, and that particular theology is not found in the Old Testament or the Torah.
I heard someone mention something like the book of Jeremiah or something like that. The Jews were. I did try to search for it. I wasn't able to find it.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
I
some
looked for
homework
it and
me.
I couldn't.
Okay, yeah, that's my
Yeah, so
homework for me to do.
but it is a teaching. It's a teaching
Maybe
from.
it's in the Talmud or something.
Yeah, it is. It's in the
okay.
Mishnah. Genesis Rabbah. You can find them, document this as a belief. So they would say only for 12 months do Jews go to Sheol or wherever this place is, and then they're either annihilated or they come out of it. So this view is found in Talmudic Mishnah or the Old Torah. So I think it's quite clear that the Quran is actually just addressing this.
Interesting.
Yeah, so at least that's what the context seems to imply.
What about Jeremiah 8:8? To bring it up.
Sure. And there are actually some Sunni support for this. Al-Tabari, for example, in his tafsir, he talks about how he understands this as a separate book is being written. So it's not like the Torah is being rewritten or manifested differently or corrupted or any sense, but rather it's a new book that they're writing in conjunction with what they have, and it's this new book that's in error that they're selling for a little gain. Actually, just for reference though, I don't think he doesn't connect it with the Talmud or Mishnah. Okay. I'm doing that. Okay. but he does connect it with a new book. So there's kind of some limited way of looking at it.
Did
But
the Talmud and Mishnah though exist in the time of the Prophet, or was it
in the time of the Prophet,
in
yeah.
the next century?
In the time of the Mishnah certainly
It would have
did.
been a century before.
Yeah. Yes.
Like the 5th or the 6th century.
Yes, it's about then.
Okay.
And to be fair, there's good reason to look at the Quranic account, and you can see that it does seem to know of the Talmud. Surah Al-Ma'idah ayah 32, for example, you can find that almost word for word in the Talmud.
Yeah.
So scholarship is generally quite.
You mean the one about life?
Yeah,
Whoever takes-
if you've taken one life, it's like you've taken the life of everybody.
Yeah.
And I've seen that and I've read it in the Talmud. I haven't read the whole Talmud, obviously it's huge, but I've read that specific bit because you can Google it and you can find it and you'll see it for yourself. So I think the Quran author is aware of these things
What do you think of Sidney Griffith's view?
regarding
Have you
like
heard of
the
Sidney
Bible.
with the Quran's view of the Bible, because he seems to take a nuanced view, which is that the Quran is affirming but also correcting specific parts.
I don't think that's
Or maybe-
necessarily his view. From what I read, his view is that
Because he basically says Christians understand the Gospels to to be the 4 canonical Gospels.
Yeah.
And the Quran is like correcting that understanding by saying there's just one Gospel.
Okay.
Which is of Jesus.
Yes. Yes. I don't know if he would go as far as to say that in practice, though, that doesn't boil down to at least the 4 Gospels. Because, for example, the Quran mentions other things, and I think the Quran author thinks that the Injil is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and other things. Well, okay, so the Tatian's diatessaron. It could be. The problem I have with that is that there's not really much reason to think it was in use then. So first of all,
isn't it translated by that time into Arabic?
Well, not Arabic, but Aramaic in the written sense.
Oh, okay.
The question is, I think if I remember correctly, Tatian's work, and maybe I'm wrong about this, so check me out, but I think it's originally written in Greek. So you'd have to say that it's
second century.
So you have to say it was written in Greek and then eventually it's translated.
In like translations, basically.
Yeah, so we would have to argue it was present and in use at the time. But the issue is that there's actually a better contender, which again is in Aramaic, the Aramaic Peshitta. That would be, that seems most likely. Now, I've been influenced by Gabriel Reynolds' works, so I think there probably was Christians, at least wherever this Quran was, because I'm not totally convinced that it was all just in Mecca or the Hejaz. I think maybe some aspects of it were elsewhere, and I think that helps explain certain traditions. But wherever this was, there were Christians around. And I think that because of that, we can look at what historically Christians would have had as their texts, and they would have been Aramaic speaking, Syriac speaking, Aramaic written, and they would have had the Peshitta as their main form of text in the churches. So,
what do you think of then Libiano's and Dean Response's position that the Quran is a general confirmation?
Right.
Is that what
yeah, that's what they say, yeah.
Okay,
so, first of all...
I actually disagree on that.
Sure.
Wording. I say
yeah.
specific.
Yeah, well, actually, that's...
I've heard your response, which is the general theme.
Yeah.
The New Testament is the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's cool you know that. That's great. The problem I have with the word general is that it's actually not right. What Dean Response and Libiano mean by that is they mean specific. They mean it's a specific kind of confirmation. It's confirming certain things and not others. It's a partial confirmation. But for some reason they insist on using the word general. But I don't think that's an appropriate term. For example, you can talk about things generally and actually mean totality. So, for example, remember I said, could you get me a bottle of water? I actually mean a fully filled, totally there bottle of water, right? But I may not have specified that. I may have just said, get me a bottle of water. I don't mean parts of a bottle of water. So, so let's just say partial confirmation. The problem with their view is, one, I don't think the Quran ever gives that kind of description. The Quran is very consistent. It uses broad terms. It says confirming what is with you, and it never elaborates and says, but not this, or only this, or emphasizing this. We can look at the different categories. Many broad categories are mentioned in the Quran in a positive way that is in a confirmatory sense. So what I'm left with...
It's like in guidance.
Yeah, it's like guys. One of the parts of my book is I actually just take the terms ascribed to the Quran and ascribed to the Torah and Injil, and I just lay them out. And I'm just like, none of this is negative. There's no negative term given to the Injil or Torah. It's guidance, it's light. The Torah is called the Book of Moses, Kitab al-Musa. You know, the Quran has more names for it, more positive names for the Quran than there are Torah or the Injil, but they're equated. So here's an interesting thing. What's that term? I'm trying to remember the term now. It might come to me, but there's a term in the Quran that, if you read it through Sunni tradition, might actually be applied to both the Quran, the Torah, and the Injil. It'll come to me, but anyway, it's just interesting.
What's the meaning of the word?
I'll have to remember. But basically, if you look at Surah 15, Ayah 91, it talks about how this thing is being shredded or taken into parts, and the Quran condemns that behavior. And there are because it doesn't say exactly what the thing is, it doesn't name it. Oh no, sorry, no, it does. The Quran actually. I think it's it's not Furqan, it's not that, but I think it might actually be the term Quran. I think the term Quran is mentioned there, but according to Sunni tradition, there is actually one way of reading this that says it's actually talking not about the Quran but about the Torah, but it's acceptably being called the Quran, as in the recitation.
Maybe it's a verbal form of the
Yeah,
word Quran,
it's interesting.
which means recitation.
Yeah, but
I need to look it up.
yeah, look it up. It's interesting. The main understanding from what I can tell though is that it is the Quran, and they understand it to be when it's revealed to the polytheists. I think that they take it into parts and he condemns them for that. But anyway, it's interesting. So. So basically the Quran has very positive views of the Quran,
I agree,
the Torah, and the other issue is partialism. The Quran in 285, now that's in context of law, but it says, hey, Jews in the 7th century, you can't just pick and choose. You follow the Torah or you don't. Now, if
the context is about the covenant that God made with them. And so
yes,
as to
in the sense
fulfill
of
or
expressing
keep
the
that-
Mosaic law, yeah. But it's in the context of Muhammad's day. And you look at Sunni tradition and they say, well, there were two Jewish tribes and they were at war with each other and they were capturing each other and then ransoming each other. Where does it say in the Torah you can kill your own tribe or you can ransom your own tribe? That's the argument. But 691, talking to the Jews, first of all, it calls the Torah they have in their possession the Book of Moses, which is quite a lofty thing if this is a corrupt or in some way altered text. And then it says, you make it into parts. And if I remember correctly, the word used there often is translated into parchment. So literally, you make it into parchment. You're writing down, but only some of it. And then it goes on to say you conceal some of this, and you reveal some of this. And so basically, that to me is quite clear.
That's Surah 1591, did you say?
What I'm saying, that's when I say the Quran being described as being taken in parts. That's 1591. What I just described to you there is 691. 691, it's useful they both have 91 in the thing, but 691 is, again, very clearly a very positive affirmation of the Torah as the Book of Moses, and how dare the Jews, contemporary with Muhammad's time, because Muhammad's being told to say this to them, how dare you take this into parts.
So would that be corruption like Tahrif Nazim rather than
As in-
Tahrif Mana?
As in, like, what they're doing is they're taking it into...
Textual corruption rather than...
Well, you see, I don't actually think that what this is talking about is like some kind of altering or mass project to change the Torah. And also, I don't think that's feasible, which is another problem I have. I think what that is it's basically saying, Jews, you're being really selective. Like, Muhammad is found in your Torah, but you guys aren't talking about that. You're hiding it, you're concealing it. I mean, the word conceal only makes sense if you have something to conceal it. If I say there's a man in this park who's concealing a weapon...
Concealing would also be a corruption, an act of corrupting something.
In the sense that, yeah, in the sense of that you're not saying the fullness of something, right?
Yeah.
You're like saying a part and leaving a part. So yeah, if I say someone here is concealing a weapon, that only makes sense in the context of them actually having a weapon.
Would the Jews then, did they deny that they were concealing something or hiding something?
I cannot remember if it goes on and gives the Jews' response. I can't remember if it does, but 692, if I remember correctly, is actually one of the confirming verses. So the very next verse is confirming again. So again, everything is structured to be very positive in terms of what the Torah and Injil are and what they have within them. I say all of them, because I don't think 279 is appropriately understood as either the Torah or the Injil. I mean, I'm going to push you now. Can you name any other verse that you think could properly be understood as saying that the Torah or the Gospel have been in any way corrupted? In a sense of being written, or like lost or something like that?
So like Surah Imran, where it says, it's not right for a prophet to be given scripture of knowledge of wisdom respect, and then to say to the people, worship me besides or along with God.
Right.
So in the New Testament, you may have like Jesus being declared as God or something to that effect.
Well, this is the thing though. So I think the problem we have here is what you're kind of assuming is that the Quran author just knows this. Right, I'm familiar with the verse. You're assuming that the Quran author knows this is present in the text of the Torah or the Gospel and is actively, intentionally going against it.
Because
So
the Christians would have told him
right.
in
So
that polemical environment.
yeah, but how does he know if they're telling the truth? Because if you look at early Islamic thought, they're very skeptical of what comes out of the mouths of Christians and Jews.
brought up the verse in their book.
Well, they can say it's in. Well, first of all, this is a non-literate society, right? Do you accept that the Hijaz is mostly? I say non-literate to mean they did technically write stuff, but their primary way of communicating is orally.
Maybe partially written, but orally, like the Bible was known or spoken about.
Yeah, it was spoken about, yeah. But I would think the main way for the layman to communicate biblical truths would have been just orally.
People, it could be like the doctors of the religion.
Oh, sure. I would say that in this kind of environment, if Muhammad is engaging with Christian audiences, I think it's going to be orally that they explain to him what is in the scriptures. And of course, he's free to say, I think those guys are wrong about that. I think that's not actually there. I'm going to say to my followers, no, actually, Allah is not a father in any sense. No, actually, the crucifixion didn't happen. And then the Christians may have been like, oh, I don't trust this guy. But he could have firmly understood why that might have been.
To him that it is in fact there.
Of course, but how does he know? Because he himself can't read according to tradition. And he does have some companions that maybe could, but he needs to have, first of all, their scriptures would have been Aramaic. It would have been Arabic. Sidney Griffith, the Bible in Arabic. He argues that there is no such translation. I agree. I don't think there was.
He does say that it was maybe partially translated into Arabic.
Oh, sure. There may have been a partial.
Like parts.
Right, but there was no complete, like, you couldn't have gone into a church and been like, hey, I'd love to read like the whole New Testament in Arabic.
Until like the 8th century.
Yeah. By the 8th century, that's when we start to see fully translated works of it.
Matthew's Gospel.
The whole Bible, actually, I think, by the 8th century. I think. Maybe it's the 9th century, but
maybe you're right.
So yeah, ultimately, he doesn't have a way of verifying. Because the Christians and Jews, they have their stuff in Aramaic. He's not an Aramaic speaker, he's an Arab speaker. He hears what they say, but he has no way of reading the text to verify. So he ultimately has to make a judgment call. Now, I think that evidence is better understood in the theory that the Quran is a human work, in all honesty. Because,
could it be that the Quran also shows like detailed knowledge, like the subtleties of certain stories, and then it's like giving its own correction, like what Liviano and
so let me clarify. I do think yeah. Well, they say conscious edits, right?
Yeah.
So I take term with that terminology as well. What they really mean is the Quran is intentionally re-revealing the uncorrupt original. Because remember, in the Islamic paradigm, Allah revealed the Torah to Moses. So anything in there has to align with the Quran unless the Torah was corrupted. So if the Torah has been corrupted, the Quran is now just telling the story of Joseph, for example, but the Quran is re-revealing the original that actually was given to Moses to begin with. Because otherwise you'd have to say that Allah is just changing the story over time. And I think that's very problematic theologically.
Wouldn't that just mean that he's correcting the story?
By correcting.
Meaning and texture.
Yeah, but by correcting, he's re-revealing the original. That's what he's doing, right? So the issue I have with that is through Joseph Whitstone and Charles Ritz, they've written articles on this, and I really encourage you to look this up because this is some source material I quote from my book. They look at the Quranic account and they notice that it's taken influence from Syriac Christian accounts of the Joseph story. So in other words, the Quranic author is responding to the story. I'm not going to say copied or anything like that because he isn't copying.
I believe the Quran sermonizes, like it takes stories.
Yeah, and it makes lessons, and to be honest, it applies a lot to Muhammad. It takes things that happened to Joseph, and it's basically saying, and look at how this relates to Muhammad in his current condition.
And that's what even people do today, like in the churches and mosques. They take certain passages and apply them to their present.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong in doing that. There's nothing wrong in doing that. But what I will say, though, is that is not you can't harmonize that in this instance with the idea of conscious edits. Because basically what you have to say is, if God is consciously editing because he's re-revealing the actual original uncorrupted form, he has to be doing that for all contentious parts of the scripture. Because if he isn't doing it for all of them, and there are some parts that are left contradictory, then what is he doing? Because that to me just sounds like he doesn't know.
It could be there's some things which are essential for people's salvation, and others it's not like essential. So it's like with the crucifixion, like Ibn Taymiyyah's position is that even if people believed in the crucifixion, God can still forgive them because that was something that they didn't know better.
Right,
As long as they didn't worship Jesus.
But this goes back to the requirement of you actually do, as a Christian or Jew, before the Quran is revealed, you do actually have to follow these categories of things in your scripture, which also includes prophet accounts. If you look at Surah 12, the same Surah of Joseph, you look at Ayah 111, the very last Ayah in the chapter, it says, like, in these prophet stories, there is a lesson of wisdom for those of understanding. The Quran is here to confirm what... it's another Masadic verse. So again, in the context of stories of prophets, the Quran is like, yeah, it's confirming what you have with you. So now we...
The word min appeared.
So what did you want to check? I actually don't think the word min changes anything, to be honest with you. I don't find it particularly
Convincing.
No. But again, so think of it while I find this. The Quran is rephrasing the story in a way that comes from Syriac accounts. It's influenced by them. It's responding to them, actually. One theory that Charles Risk says...
Responding rather than...
Yeah, so one theory that Charles... No, I wouldn't say copies, because it's not fair, because he actually does deviate at points. Like, he actually does introduce his own stuff. But there are clear things that you can be like, hang on, that's not in the Genesis account. We find that in the Syriac Christian accounts that were contemporary with the time, and it's very reasonable to think that Aramaic-speaking Christians would have got this from this point. So, because it's been around for centuries at this point, and they speak the same language, and it's an incredibly popular story, incredibly popular homily, so it looks like Muhammad is responding to it, which is in his right to do. But if he's responding to it, then his objective is not to re-reveal the original. His objective is to respond to the Christian and Jewish accounts. So that would mean there are parts in the Quran that are not conscious edited at all. So now you have a selective conscious editing by the Quran, if you still want to hold to the theory, in which case you need to say something like you, which is, well, maybe...
It could be both. It could be both. You don't have to pick and choose.
Well, how can you re-reveal the original if you're also choosing to paraphrase elements from a known human story?
The situation comes up, and so God chooses to respond, but also at the same time. Correct?
No. So what I mean is, for example, let me give you an idea. So in the Genesis account, in chapter 37 of Genesis, it talks about how Joseph's brothers, they planned to throw Joseph down the well as they see him in the distance. It's like an impromptu thing. Whereas the Quran says that actually it was the day before, and they were at home with Jacob, and they planned it then. You know where we see that? We see that in Syriac accounts, where the Syriac writers don't make it clear that it happened at the same time. They accept a period of time difference. So in other words, the Quran is responding to the Syriac version that allows for a time distance, not the Genesis account which says it was simultaneous. So the problem is you can't be both. You can't be both saying it's simultaneous and saying it was the day before with different people. Literally, he's talking to Jacob at the time. So do you see how the Quran has to pick and choose?
The Quran accepts maybe parts of the Genesis account and parts of the Christian homily as well.
But these are opposing account details, right? So either it happened before and it happened somewhere else, or it happened contemporary simultaneously as they see him. Those two, you can't reconcile those.
From your perspective, it seems like it happened before.
Yeah, which just so happens to be in line with the way the Syriac bishops were writing it. No, all that means is it just means the Quran is engaging with that. The Quran doesn't have this objective to re-reveal the original Hebrew account. It just doesn't have that as...
It could be both.
How could it be both if they're different? But they're different though.
I agree. Both the Quran and the Christian homily both unite against the Genesis account. With regards to this.
Right. So you have to pick one, right? You have to side with someone. Do you say that it was simultaneous and agree with the Genesis account, or do you agree with the Syriac Christian account? And the Quran author agrees with that one. That's within his right to do that.
And that could be maybe part of the Quran being the Furqan, or the.
Okay. If you want to say it's re-revealing, you're going to have to say one of two things. Either you deny this and you say, no, it really is trying to capture the original given to Moses. He's not trying to engage with Syriac Christians and you paraphrase their emphasis. Or you have to say, well, maybe that Syriac father who didn't know Hebrew somehow has accurately recalled the original revelation given thousands of years prior to Moses.
It could be some previous old tradition as well.
But you see, first of all, if you look at the historical account, this is introduced by these people. They literally wrote it in their own homilies. They're using their artistic license.
Moses is also writing generations later.
Right?
And there's also multiple traditions as well contained within the Genesis account with regards to the story of Joseph. Like, to
Right.
whom was Joseph sold to? Whether he was sold
Sure.
to the Ishmaelites or to...
Well, the Quran differs on that as well, which also aligns with Syriac accounts. So, for example, in the Quran, the animal that is said to devour Joseph, according to the brothers, differs. The Quran says wolf in Arabic. The Genesis account, from 37 onwards, says wild animal. It never specifies what animal it is. But interestingly, the Syriac fathers use the term wolf in a way to make connections with like a wolf devouring the early church kind of thing. Jesus is a shepherd of the sheep. They made these kind of connections. So again, the Quran authors are aligning with their view. So it's what I'm saying is, the Syriac writings and ultimately the Quran are not candidates for the original Hebrew revelation. Now that's
The Quran also contradicts as well, like the homilies as well.
It does, yeah. It changes apart. So I'll give you an example of that if you want. So for example, the Syriac fathers do include both visions or both dreams that are given to Joseph in the Genesis account. But do you know what they do? They add typology to them. So they say in the first dream, I don't know if you know this, but you're probably familiar with the second dream where Joseph sees the moon, the stars, the sun. Well, in the first dream, Joseph sees different collections of wheat that they're out in the field collecting, him and his brothers, and they all have these stacks of wheat, and then all of a sudden his stands and upright, and the others bow down before him. Now, the Syriac fathers, you know what they did? They said, well, this is like a typology of Christ, basically, and they understood it that way. Another thing is, in the Genesis account, it talks about Joseph being given a robe. Not there in the Quran. The Quran author didn't include that aspect, but it was very popular at his time by Syriac readers because we see it in these accounts.
Could those be examples of conscious editing by the author?
So this is why I don't like the term conscious editing, because it's misleading. Because I ultimately do agree that the author chooses to write what he wants and to agree and disagree with what he wants. He obviously does. That he would be a pretty bad writer if he didn't do that. But what I want to emphasize is that the theory that Libiano and Dean are giving, what it really is just they are re-revealing the original, and that's how they solve the contradictions, right? And I'm saying he doesn't always do that. I mean, I don't actually believe this is his intention anyway, but even if I were to grant it, I would also have to say he doesn't do this in significant aspects of the Quran. There are other places as well we can go to where I don't think he's doing this, because he's clearly being influenced by other stories. Even interestingly, even not even biblical ones, even just popular stories about the cave of sleepers. He's modifying that story. So, for example, the Quran talks about a dog. The dog is not in the original story. If we look at the Syriac versions of this, and we go back and we use the historical approach to find out what the earliest account of the story was, it's a watcher, and they interpret the watcher to be an angel. But then this story gets used by the Christian community, and it gets used in creative ways, in licenses in the liturgy to mean, well, these Christians in this cave, well, you see, they're like the church, and Jesus is the shepherd over the sheep of the church, and there's a watcher that guards the sheep, and they go, well, the watcher must be like a sheepdog, because that's what. And Gabriel Reynolds talks about this. It's really interesting. We actually have we know where this is introduced. And you know what's interesting? When it's introduced, the very work of this guy, his name's like Theodosius or something, he actually says the dog's name. The dog has a name. So my point is the Quran is responding to this story. It's not trying to give you the original cave of the... I keep confusing with Cave of Treasures. The story of the Seven Sleepers. Yeah. Companions of the Cave, that's the one. He's not trying to do it. He's making his own point. He's using creative license to make his own point in his own religious text. I know, it's a long... Yeah, God bless you, man.
I mean, it could be the Quran responding to certain...
well, it's making a point.
As well as...
But it can't be re-revealing if we know the original doesn't have the word dog there. that's a later change based on the word watcher that took a theological change over time.
Maybe the dog was forgotten traditionally, and then.
But you see, to support that view, you need evidence. You need to be able to show manuscripts or traditions that predate these. And look, there is a dog. Then that's absolutely great. If you can do that, then that's a point refuted. But as it stands today, the evidence tells us that in the earliest accounts, they are consistent. It's a watcher who stands outside this cave. But later Christians, in their understanding, change the meaning, and they say, well, it's not. The watcher is a sheepdog. That then finds its way into the Quran that says, yeah, it's a dog.
It could be these later Christians were maybe inspired by God.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to do. What I'm trying to say is,
Even in the Quran, it mentions Christians are inspired, like those that believe God is inspired. And it's chapter 5. I forgot the exact verse number, but so it's not necessarily receiving revelation.
what I would say is, I think that's a very unlikely understanding of it. I think it's very clear the Quran author has chosen to use contemporary stories for his own effect, for his own reason, and he's well within his right to do that. But what I would say is that does demonstrate, with very high probability, that he is not attempting to re-reveal things. He just isn't. And again, these are just two examples. There are. I think it does. You but you don't know,
correcting and revealing.
but you cannot. Like, if we're talking about historical accounts, like of a story, you cannot say this happened in the story and something else happened in the story at the same time. The Quran author has picked one, and he's picked the contemporary version amongst Syriac listeners. That means he can't be re-revealing, because look, I can actually grant you that the Genesis account isn't even the real Torah. I can actually do that in this argument. All I have to say is that the Syriac version he's been influenced from is not a valid candidate for the original given to Moses. I don't even need to tell you what the original is. I just need to say no. It's not a valid candidate, and hence he can't be re-revealing. That's not his objective.
Traditionally, Jews have believed that the Torah has been revealed both written as well as orally.
Rabbinic Jews.
Could be there's some information that is not orally. So just like you have the Sunnah of the prophets, could be that Moses could narrate
I know.
some.
My friend, my point is, now we're speculating, and I don't think there's any basis to this.
From a theological point of view.
I get that.
How I
Yeah.
would theologically look at the data and then
Right.
interpret it or understand it.
I would say that the evidence is overwhelmingly in favour that this is it's an artistic and pragmatic and polemic reading of the Syriac writings.
And I wouldn't disagree with you. I would agree
Check
with
out
you.
the-
I wouldn't
yeah.
just be limited to just that.
I don't think you can have both. I think there's an if or all here. There's one or the other.
Check out, what did you say?
So
Like-
Joseph Whitstone
Okay.
and Charles Risks. I'm trying to remember his last name. I'll put it in the comments or something.
But I'm sure it's mentioned in your book or referenced in your book.
It is, yeah. I reference them quite significantly. Gabriel Reynolds, in his book, actually references them, which is
What is that?
Gabriel Reynolds' book.
Which one?
The latest one, Christianity and the
I've got
Quran.
the audio book. I still haven't yet listened to it.
I'll give it. I find it convincing.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big Reynolds fan at this point.
Yeah, I like him as well.
I like his demeanor. He's a really nice guy.
Have you ever
He's
had
respectful.
him, or
Have what, sorry?
have you ever had him on your channel, or have you?
I've spoken in a limited sense to him.
Okay.
Yeah, we email and stuff, but
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Tell him to try to get Shabir Ali on.
Shabir, yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, that'd be
Shabir
interesting.
Ali cites him a lot as
Yeah.
well.
Are you you have a high positive view of Shabir Ali?
Yeah, yeah.
Thought so. Okay. Cool.
If you need his email or something, just let me know now.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's a good
He
point to stop.
recently actually debated James White, by the way. Yeah. we
Yes,
can
I need
end,
to
by
watch
the
it.
way, so, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that
Samuel
chat.
Green as well.
Yes, Samuel Green. Yeah, I know Samuel Green. I mean,
There's
cultural.
debated on this topic, Islamic dilemma. more
Yes,
than once.
I've watched it. Yes, I'm indebted to some of his thoughts and his expressions as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for the chat. I am of the view that,
Yeah.
I'm of the view of all publicity is good publicity. So I'd love to chat about the Islamic dilemma with
And this
anyone.
wasn't a debate.
And of course, I would especially like to chat with you because you're calm and you're intelligent on this conversation
And
and
you
you're
as
well informed.
well, so thank you, I appreciate it.
No worries, thank you. That's it. Well done. I might do a wrap up if that's so good. So I had a really lovely chat with Naz.
Yeah, we love Naz.
Yeah, Naz.
Naz. Sorry.
He wants you to wrap up. It's all right, I guess. All right. So we had a really nice chat with. Go on, put it on.
I asked him if you
Yeah,
wanted to do a
probably
wrap
will
up,
be,
but he
yeah.
said no, so
That's
fair
fine.
enough. Right, there you go.
There you go.
Wait.
There we go. So I had a really good chat with Naz. He's one of the very respectful, very calm Muslims at Speaker's Corner.
Yeah, we love Nas.
Oh, there we go. Hey, nice. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it was a good chat. It was a good chat. And he went through some of the verses that try to establish corruption, because he wants to try and deny the weight of the Islamic dilemma. But I think we got to the point where we had to say, look, it doesn't say that in the Quran. The Quran is overwhelmingly positive. 119 verses in the Quran talk positively about our previous scriptures. How amazing is that? And we went through lots of different topics, a lot of in-depth things. So I think that you can refute Dean Responsa Libiano's view of conscious edits, terribly named by the way, simply by pointing out that the Quran doesn't do that in places. The entire story of Joseph, chapter 12, the Quran author actually engages with Syriac writings. And Syriac writings that differ from the Genesis account are not valid candidates for the original revelation given to Moses. So the Quran cannot be consciously editing. You can read more about this. I give this and many other examples in my book. It is coming out next Saturday, April 25th.
What's it called?
It's called The Islamic Dilemma. The Islamic Dilemma, ladies and gentlemen. It has a foreword by Dr. David Wood himself.
Ah, okay.
He wrote the foreword in the book. Yeah, we read the whole Quran to study and analyze all of the verses in the Quran that talk about our scriptures, and we did a ton of research. I cite scholarship all over the place. I have a good bibliography. I think it's airtight, and I don't think anyone has ever written in this level of detail about the Islamic dilemma, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
I think this is. Thank you very much.
So why do you think Muslims should be reading this book?
Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you read this book and you're a Muslim and you're honest with yourself, I think ultimately it's going to show you that the true scripture is the gospel and the Torah. It's the word of our Lord. And if you want to know Jesus Christ, then don't listen to what a man 600, 700 years after said. Listen to what those who knew him said. Listen to those who were contemporary to his lifetime said. And they will lead you to believing that he is your Lord and Savior. He died for you, my friends. Pray for those Muslims. But yeah, it's doing #1 on Amazon in new releases in Islamic theology, the category, and the category of Quran, and the category of Christian evangelism. So yeah, doing really good. So God bless you all. Like I said, hopefully I can put a link to it on this video. If there isn't one there, yell at JC, yell at these guys. But yeah, God bless you all and have a lovely day.
Well done, Chris. God bless you, brother. Well done, Chris.